When I tell people I'm an animator, sometimes they know what that means, but more often than not, I get,
"You do animation, so you must be like really good at drawing Mickey, right?"
Most people have no idea what animation really is, or the kind of work that goes into doing it. But everyone knows that animation has something to do with Mickey Mouse, which means Walt Disney, which means Disneyland. And everyone loves Disneyland.
Actually, I don't like Disneyland.
So today I thought we'd talk about what Disneyland is like for animators and artists, because there's a ton of fantastic lessons that we can learn from the parks. Now, I've never been to Disney World in Florida or any of the international Disney parks, so we'll be focusing in on the original Disneyland in Anaheim, California. When you first enter Disneyland, you're greeted by Main Street. Walt Disney created this area to feel like a 1910s, turn-of-the-century, idealized American town. It's also loosely based on his hometown in Missouri, which is actually the setting for Lady and the Tramp. But it's an architectural style and design and the colors, all of it is something that you don't really see in modern towns and really outside of the US. So it's great artistic reference and an easy way to be able to capture from it and borrow and apply this to your own work, especially if you're an illustrator, a concept artist, or someone who creates your own environment. There's a free app, you should totally download it. It's called Adobe Capture. You just take your phone and you point it, you take a picture, and it will pull all the complementary colors. You can pull out vectors that you can use in Illustrator. Technically, you could take those vectors and put them into Maya. There's lots of cool stuff you can do, but it's a free app that allows you to borrow from your surroundings and repurpose it into your art. Now, something interesting Main Street does, and a lot of people know this, is they use forced perspective. This is all over Disneyland. Forced perspective is to create an optical illusion where something looks bigger, taller, longer, shorter, whatever it's going to be, than it truly is. If you stand in the middle of Main Street and look towards the castle, they actually use forced perspective to make Main Street look much longer, more grand, and to make the castle look a lot taller than it truly is. They do this by making sure that the buildings closest to you are much taller than the buildings further down the street. They also use this trick in a vertical direction. You'll notice at Disneyland everything ends in a spire. It's wider at the base and narrow at the top, including the bricks on the castle. Bigger bricks are used on the bottom, smaller bricks are used on top. Now, another thing that Disneyland does that you should absolutely use in your animation, some of you might also know that Disneyland actually pumps smells into the park. If you're walking down Main Street, you'll smell baked goods, ice cream, sugary deliciousness. It's because they're blowing that smell through the air vents and into the street. A, to lure you in to spend more money and buy stuff, but also to further immerse you into this world they're trying to create for you. This multi-sensory immersion is something that's very important to remember, especially if you're an animator, because just as you walk down the street and you see things and you smell things and you hear things, all of your senses help you to believe the environment that you're in. Don't forget about those things when you're animating a character. Don't forget that they can smell stuff, they can hear things, they can see stuff off screen from what the audience is aware of. And you can use those as storytelling devices in your shots. So use that as a world building tool. Now, there's a ton of other animation history around Main Street. There's history of animation built into the theater where you can go in and you can watch old Mickey Mouse cartoons, the originals. There's also plenty of art galleries hidden around the corners. Most people who are just running to the rides don't notice that there are these great places where you can buy paintings and sculptures, maquettes, paint cells, sketches of characters. It's a great source of inspiration and a great place to get cool decor for your desk. So yeah, I'll be hanging this one up. And in the same way that most of us are very familiar with staying up all night to finish a project, not sleeping a whole lot and getting back into it the next day, pretty sure Walt Disney did the same thing because he had a private apartment on site above the firehouse. You can actually see Walt Disney's private apartment. Now, stepping away from Disneyland trivia, I know not everyone loves theme parks because of the social anxiety that can come with tourism culture and a ton of people everywhere all the time, but this type of environment gives you a huge opportunity for finding reference. So we're gonna show up, grab a churro, and start people watching. So find a good bench, realize that you probably ate all of the churro before you even got to the bench because let's be real, you're gonna eat the whole churro before you get there. But start taking notes on what you see. I'm not telling you to show up and record people. I'm pretty sure that can be considered illegal, so that's bad. That's why you wanna have a sketchbook or an iPad or something. But take a few minutes and practice drawing some people in interesting poses, things that they do. Draw the buildings, draw the attractions, draw the characters. Take the poses that those characters are making and try to push them. If nothing else, just write down funny things you see and use them in your shots as animation ideas. Now, I'm not gonna talk about all of Disneyland, but I know that Star Wars Galaxy Land just opened like a week and a half ago at the time of this video. And most people haven't seen it yet. But there are a ton of fantastic lessons that we can take from that new area in Disneyland. For example, one thing I'd like to point out is that this world just opened. This area of the park is brand new, but it does not look new. They made it to look weathered and lived in, somewhat ancient and decayed. This comes through in the texture details, the imperfections of the surfaces. What we would call the geometry is destroyed, and the textures and surfacing and lighting has had great care put into it. This is one of the biggest things that makes an environment look too computer generated versus looking realistic: imperfections. It's easy to make a perfectly smooth surface. It's much more difficult to make something look kind of messed up. So whether it's blaster holes or cracks, or this water dripping creating rust, or wires that aren't so perfectly strewn, they're kind of bunched up over each other in piles. It's a masterclass in making the environment feel immersive. They do something really smart at Disneyland is that the people working in those areas are wearing clothes that not only match the theme of Star Wars, sure, but the color schemes also fit the vibe, that feel like they could be a part of the world. Or even the stormtroopers who are wearing these perfectly polished white suits, they're still very intentional to fit the world. But when you look at all the regular people just walking around, it makes it feel like a theme park, and that's because they're just wearing regular, casual, everyday clothes. So think about that when you're building your world, when you're animating your shots. You shouldn't spend a whole lot of time on your characters, props, and environment. You should be focusing on the animation or whatever it is you're doing. But it is worth noting that if you spend the extra time crafting that immersion and making sure that your world fits and feels cohesive, it's going to be much easier to say what you want to say with your piece. So before we head to California Adventures, I'm going to show you one last thing that I think is very valuable. Now, some of you may want to animate characters that you don't have access to. You don't have the models, the rigs, whatever. But I'll use myself as an example here. I can model most hard surface object. If it's mechanical or inorganic, I can probably model it. Most props and stuff I can do fairly well. But I'm no good at organic humans, faces, creatures, trees, things that are alive. And it's the same with rigging. I can do a lot of mechanical stuff and things that have logic and they move on joints, but I'm no good at the stuff that you would need to rig a human face, for example. So if I wanted to animate Buzz Lightyear in 3D, what am I gonna do? Well, Disneyland has the answer. There's a giant animatronic Buzz Lightyear in the Astro Blasters ride, where all of Buzz is a physical, real animatronic character. Now, Buzz's suit is some kind of titanium alloy?
They are a beryllium carbonic alloy, and I can fly.
No.
Buzz's suit is made of a beryllium carbonic alloy, which means it's a metal. It doesn't need to flex or bend, so it's something that I could probably model with enough time. His face, however, is human enough that I'm not confident in my abilities to do that at this point. But instead of making a bad animatronic, Disney has basically just put a screen there and a physical nose, and his eyes, his mouth, and the rest of his expressions are just a screen. And I know the colors are a little funky, forgive me for that, but this is a super easy cheat where you can basically do the face in After Effects in 2D and project it back onto your character in 3D. And it works just fine. It also shows that you're a very versatile artist. Now, if you were to walk out the gates of Disneyland and just go straight, there's another park on property, and that's called California Adventures. It's also where I got this shirt, in case you're wondering. But in California Adventures, there's an area of the park called Hollywoodland. And one of the main attractions in my mind is called the Animation Academy. Now, when you walk in, you find yourself in this big hub lobby area that plays back-to-back concept art, storyboards, songs from all of your favorite Disney and Pixar movies. I can't play much of it here because of copyright issues, but this is a super cool place to be. And there's lots of little attractions within the Animation Academy itself. One of them is to draw different characters. Sometimes it's Mickey, or Stitch, or Forky, or whoever.
It's not about trying to make a perfect circle. So as long as you've got a circle-ish shape, that's all that we really need to worry about.
There's another area dedicated to the early days of traditional animation, where they have zoetropes. They also give you paper and pencil so that you can create your own. One last thing in this area is called Off the Page. It's a store or a gift shop that's also very animation focused. They have art of books, they have tons more art, but they have these awesome maquettes, these sculptures of different characters. Now recently, California Adventures unveiled the Pixar Pier. They've repurposed this area to be very focused on the Pixar movies. From a cafe themed after Luxor the Lamp, full of Pixar storyboards and beatboards, to a gift shop that actually contains a lot of the same merchandise you can find at the Pixar Studio store. Another thing is that we've all seen toys that look nothing like the actual characters, especially when it's a 3D character translated into a 3D doll or toy or something that just looks terrible. But what's impressive is that California Adventures has several of the Pixar characters as 3D objects. They're just there in the park, and they look really good. You can tell Pixar had a huge hand in designing these to make sure that they are on model. You have Jessie with this intricate detail. You can look at the shape of her legs, and it really feels like she was, two pieces of fabric pressed together, filled with fluff, and sewn in such a way that she is a toy. You've also got the Inside Out characters, which is really fun to see how pushed those designs are in 3D. Even Fear, who they had to cheat a lot of camera angles to make him look good, looks pretty good as a real thing, where the camera is you and you can just walk around them, and these look great from every angle. I couldn't get any footage of this last one, but there's actually an Incredibles roller coaster called the Incredicoaster that has the family, all the Incredibles using their powers all around the roller coaster, and they look really, really awesome. But unfortunately, you can't bring a giant camera onto the rides. Now, a funny thing back to the Luxo Cafe is they actually have a drink list that was, it seems like, designed by the people at Pixar, or at least named by them. You'll see drinks like the 2319, Scream Canister, Over Budget. A lot of them are movie references, and a lot of them are studio inside jokes. Now, I don't know everything about Pixar, so I could be off on this one, but I'm pretty sure the server room chill has to do with the render server and the room where all the computers are stored, pumping out hot air as they render the movies. Server room chill to cool them down. California Adventures is also known for its World of Color presentation. It's where they sync up music and lights and water jets and fire explosion things, pyrotechnics, whatever, and they spray it all up and they project parts of the movies, play the music, onto the surface of water they've shot into the air. It's very cool, it's very colorful. World of Color, I guess that makes sense. This is actually a technique that you can do at home. If you have Maya or whatever software, you can take any movie, image sequence, file, whatever, and you can point a virtual camera at a piece of geometry and you can actually project that file onto the geometry. Sometimes this is done just to texture an object, and other times you can do the World of Color stuff where you can have a projector in your scene. And finally, there's Cars Land, a real-world recreation of Radiator Springs from the movie Cars. But at night they light it up and it's all the neon lights that create these interesting color effects and that really creates the visual interest of that area. So just by standing around Cars Land and noticing the different colors of lighting can give you some interesting ideas of how you might light your shot. Because most people just set up a 3-point lighting setup in their 3D software and call it good. But there are some much more interesting things you can do with light, and Cars Land has a ton of great examples to learn from. Whether it's the positioning, the brightness and intensities, or just the color choices, there's a lot to absorb. Now I know that not all of you have been to Disneyland, and if you do get to go, you're probably not going to want to geek out and just look at all the design and architecture and learn stuff. You're gonna wanna have a great time at the park. So I hope this video has helped kind of to bring some interesting lessons from these places right to you so that when you do get to go to Disneyland, you can just go ride Space Mountain and have a blast. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up, and if you wanna see more content from me, don't forget to hit subscribe and ring that bell for future uploads. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.